bit about, your experience. I mean, how do you lead in a networked age, right?
Sure. Well, I love the phrase that Jonathan Zittrain used this morning, the thin, nerdy line, when describing the operators on the NANOM list. There are other thin, nerdy lines out there, and two of them I'd like to talk about. One of them was the group of webmasters who picked up an abandoned academic project called the NCSA web server, as they happened to have been using it in a couple of interesting websites. And this being 1995 or so, everybody had kind of stars in their eyes about what the web could become. But we were using software that had largely landed in our laps, and we were improving it. We were making, fixing bugs, adding performance, making performance improvements, that kind of thing. And because none of us had really any goal of becoming a commercial software developer, we had too much fun building these websites, we were sharing these improvements with each other, kind of like baseball trading cards, right? It occurred to us one day that if we combined these into kind of a deck and put it out as a new project, that would be kind of fun. And that was the inception of the Apache project. None of us, though, wanted to take on the mantle of being, the leader of the project. I think it was a combination of humility, interest in the websites we were building and such. And so what emerged was somewhat of a consensus-oriented process of development, but one that also really tried to take the most advantage of the places where we had easy leverage. It's really easy to put up software for download for free. It's really easy to have a mailing list that is public, is archived publicly, and to which anybody can join. And what emerged was this consensus-oriented development that led to a piece of software that picked up very widely and deployed very widely. And we realized at one point that aside from maybe 20% of us, we hadn't really ever met in person. We'd really just been communicating online and sharing these patches. And we gradually over time that changed. We did form a nonprofit structure around this, a 501c3. But even to this day, Apache remains entirely a volunteer-driven organization. And what we've actually developed is something of a guild structure, where individuals have membership, they elect a board, and each of these projects, beyond just the web server project, there's now 60 of them, report to the board. But the actual technical decisions are still made by volunteers. And there's a kind of duocracy that emerged. Very naturally, those who had the most time to contribute or had the most interesting ideas emerged as the de facto leaders within that community. And what we realized was that radical inclusiveness was kind of key to bringing on kind of the best and brightest in the project. But we also needed to have a way for people to progress from being average users to people who reported bugs, to people who reported a bug with a patch that fixed that bug, to becoming somebody who could add a feature or to even be somewhat of a core developer, right? And that radical inclusiveness would play out in pretty interesting ways. There was one developer named Alexei Kosa who was a very helpful contributor, often answering questions that other people had posted, providing very thoughtful analyses of other people's patches, that kind of thing. And at one point, about 3 years into his career at this project, he said, "I'm very sorry, but I'm probably going to have to dial down my involvement. I'm starting at Stanford as a freshman next year." And that was really cool. We wouldn't have anticipated that. So that was kind of the late 90s. Apache has grown. We now are still the most predominant web server out there and have a lot of other projects going on. And all of them are about reinforcing open standards on the net, keeping the web as an open platform, and as new technologies emerge, trying to make sure that there's this equal playing ground of technology that helps reinforce that open society. The story of Mozilla is very different. Mozilla started out as a commercial project inside of Netscape. In 1998, Netscape decided to release the software as open source, partly because it was trendy to do at the time, partly because they were giving the software away anyways, and it seemed to make sense. And the project struggled for quite a while. Anytime you have a big code base inside of the company, putting it out there as an open source project means having to get a lot of people to understand and comprehend what was a couple million lines of code and written purely for internal use at that point. And Netscape as a company was managing that project very much as kind of an R&D thing without necessarily a concrete deliverable product as the target goal. And actually two developers, one of them Blake Ross, the other Dave Hyatt, Blake started as an intern at Netscape as a 15-year-old in 1998-99, working on Mozilla, working on these open source technologies, and he was getting very frustrated. And when he went back to high school, he started to work on a very stripped-down web version of the Mozilla browser, one that threw out the mail client, threw out the newsgroup reader, and a lot of unnecessary cruft that had built up. And he put out this version 0.1 of something he called Firefox. And at first it was it was ignored. At first it was something that didn't seem to come from inside of Netscape or inside of the Mozilla project. So how could we do this, right? But gradually, through both the technical underpinnings being very solid and through Blake's skill at being persuasive, at being able to communicate his ideas, being able to rally people to his side rather than turn them off by being abrasive. Firefox was able that idea of the stripped down browser started to take hold. And on the day that Blake graduated, in the year that Blake graduated from high school and started as a freshman again at Stanford, the Mozilla Foundation, which had been spun out from AOL by this point, had entirely focused its efforts on Firefox and moved the Mozilla suite to history, basically. That to me was just a pretty radical example of an organization tolerating disruptive change. And that disruptive change is a part of the open source culture. It's partly enabled by the fact that licenses on these technologies allow for radical forks, radical divisions. As an organization, Mozilla would not have survived if it couldn't have tolerated that kind of disruptiveness within its own ranks. So Mozilla today is a 501c3 foundation as well. We just shipped Firefox 3, and the cool story there around kind of this inclusiveness and leadership is that 2 million people participated in the beta and release candidate cycle before the shipping of Firefox 3. About 1% of the total user base of Firefox. That's 2 million people who were trying it out, reporting bugs, feeding into that whole ecosystem that makes open source actually work, that bidirectional ecosystem. And at the day of launch, Firefox 3 was available in 45 different languages, which goes to the internationalization of that effort as well. Lots and lots of sub-stories in there that we can jump into soon. Great.